Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Tuesday at 10:21 on another kind of beautiful winter day or winter morning. It's now snowing here. They said I guess a few days ago, or at least the forecast a few days ago was that we were supposed to get another 5 or 6 inches either today, Tuesday, or Wednesday. But I couldn't remember which day, but we're at Tuesday right now, and it's snowing pretty heavily. So yeah, it's pretty. I've always talked about the what it's like a lot of the times being living in New England, but then also Maine. Maine has a reputation. Whenever it comes up all the time, but I talk to friends that live far out of state, live like somewhere in New York or wherever, and or they haven't been to Maine before, or they haven't experienced a winter in Maine. And a lot of people always have this perception of Maine as being this like kind of this Arctic place during the winter, where it's like the months go on and it's like extreme cold and extreme snow and all these things. And it is the case that I think there's some truth to that. It's lots of winters in the past. We've had many pretty prolonged, or at least it feels like these extreme winters, or they're pretty prolonged. But they're pretty average, I think, like anywhere else. You know, they do the season of winter definitely does go. It feels like it's eternity to some degree. I mean, when you get to like say late October, to where the temperatures, around Halloween time to like early November, when the kind of the winter climate, slowly kind of envelops us here. It's it does seem, when you think from November to here we are in late February, March now, it does feel like it's eternity. But I don't know. It's a give and take. New England itself, like I think winters at times can be probably worse in New York, especially upstate. Up north here in Maine, they get quite a bit more snow. We don't get as much snow. Like we don't. It doesn't seem like we've had a really harsh winter in a long time. But it does still feel like it does go on forever. I'm a big fan of the snow. I do actually like the snow and the whole kind of atmosphere. The cold gets a little bit tiresome after a while, especially if it gets in the single or the teens. It's kind of a prolonged kind of thing. But at the same time, it's a cool trade-off, I think, because the spring time of year and the summertime of year here in Maine, in my experience traveling and being in other areas during the summer, I've always loved the summertime. I've always been, a person that could live year round in a warm climate. I've always loved the hot weather. I think, the spring and especially summertime here in Maine it's literally, in my opinion, the most gorgeous place on earth. I've never, I've been to parts of the country, and a few times I've been out of the country and experienced their spring or their summer season. And and I think a lot of it has to do being that we're a coastal kind of area. Coastal, we live in a coastal region, like, so the ocean is like 5 minutes away from my house, and we have a nice balance of the mountain. It's a very mountainous area, but then there's also areas where it's very flat, and there's a lot of areas where it's untouched. So we have beautiful, some real beautiful wooded areas, lots of woods, and there's a good balance of that with somewhat of a civilization. So I think being it's probably mostly because, at least for me, why I love it so much, being so close to the ocean. It's a pretty beautiful and it's a very like majestic kind of environment. And I have always felt, even though it's a little bit of a trade off when we experience the New England climate, sometimes it's really good to have that variety with the seasons. But springtime, summertime, I think Maine is the most gorgeous place to be, probably in the world. And and it's also like I've talked to like a lot talked about it before. A lot of people who have seasonal work, particularly like in the service industry or say musicians even too for that matter. Most of their income comes during those times of year. This winter, though, I will say has been, I don't know, it's been probably as far as you know mostly pertaining to music. It's been with gigs and just opportunities and some new things that have been coming up, and also with some new venues that have opened up. I think it's been the best winter that I've experienced here. It's been probably the busiest winter I've ever experienced here, and there's been a lot of activity, a lot more activity and hustle and bustle about things to do and new and exciting things kind of popping up here and there as far as venues go. There's been three different places that have opened up here locally in Maine that are really really cool and interesting, and a few places that are now doing music more frequently during the winter, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, years past, you know, in my experiences here in Maine during the winter, it goes from one extreme literally to where there's all this activity summer in the summer season and all these things to do, and just a plethora of choices. And then you get into the cold winter months and you're kind of at zero. There's still things to do, and I know a lot of artists like it to use it for the time to write music, and artists in general like to use that isolation to kind of create and be away and be a little bit more isolated, which I like too. But I I don't look at it the same way anymore. But as far as sheer activity and things to do and opportunities for local bands and just places that have been popping up in the middle of winter, it's I have to say it's probably been the best winter as far as those things go that I've experienced here in Maine since I've been living here, and I've been here for a long time. I moved up here in the late '90s, so it's pretty cool because there's three venues, two or three venues that have opened up, especially one in Camden, the Gypsy Rose Tavern, which has been just a pretty amazing thing that's been occurring where they're just having music all the time. They have a really great atmosphere, a lot of great food, and there's a lot of there's so many musicians and artists in this area that it's just it's amazing and it's really inspiring. And now there's this new venue, and they're really showcasing that, and it's pretty it's pretty awesome. And then also places like Marshall Wharf and Three Tides, they keep very active during the summer. Ever since they opened, after things kind of got a little bit easier as far as maneuvering to a degree with this whole pandemic situation, they've been hitting it hard as far as having music and entertainment. I just went the other night on a Friday night to see some music, and it was really great. And that wasn't a thing of years back or in the past, even before the pandemic. And going to see music there on a Friday or Saturday night. So between those two places alone, lots of things going on, and you have the other clubs and other places that are still doing things too. But these places are really pretty steadfast with supporting and having music and having art and all those kinds of things. And so it's very cool. And there was another bar that just opened up in town in Belfast that doesn't really necessarily have music, but it's a very cool place. I think it's called Ophelia, and it's this really cool like little tiny little bar, but they do some events there, but it just opened in the middle of winter. But it's a very cool little spot, so there's like all these things going on with that. And then there's this other place that opened this winter and had things going on during the fall of last year, called the Underground Lounge, which is part of the Maskers Theater. And they've been doing lots of events through the winter. And so that never really was a thing in the past. So it's been very cool. And I've been really surprised. And just seeing how, this whole thing, will keep going, and hopefully it will keep going and keep growing. So, and as far as with this channel goes, I love doing the videos. I love trying to bring variety to the topic of films, and my trying to always show my deep love for films and what all of those things entail, and how much films really play such a big part of for me all around. So this is a movie today. I'm talking about a movie that, and I've been saying too, lately too, for probably the last few months, I've been doing a lot of films that I definitely consider to be a lot of foreign films. Most of the exploitation movies that I've been reviewing on this channel, and also just in general, most of the movies I've been reviewing lately, and a lot of movies that I've been buying for the first time that I had never seen, that I've been, and then I've been doing these videos for this very channel, have been movies I've never seen before. And I've gotten a lot of movies from Italy, from Spain, some French movies, some German films, even movies from Asia. And lately, I've been checking out some really. I got turned on to some very cool Japanese films. So that's been really cool. And I've been in this space where I've been like really diving into a lot of foreign films again. I've always loved foreign films. I never could understand when I know a lot of people over the years where it's come up in conversation, they sometimes have this weird I don't know, aversion or thing against foreign films because they don't like to read subtitles while they watch a movie, which I think is pretty ignorant and kind of silly. I've never had a problem with that. I just look at it as a good movie experience, and it's in some ways I almost like that. I almost like watching subtitles with films because it's sometimes maybe the the levels of the dialogue on the movie could be a little bit low, so you have to really listen and you have to really crank up the volume. And just having subtitles obviously makes things a lot easier to understand what's going on. But it's never been a thing that I've had where it's had me had has given me any reservation to watching foreign films. But so it's been awesome, discovering so many great foreign films. And this is a movie here. This is a French movie called The Silence. This is one of my. This is definitely one of my all-time favorite movies, and definitely one of the greatest foreign films I've ever seen. And I never really hear this movie ever talked about. There was a huge boom about 5 to 10 years ago of foreign films that were really getting lots of, like, say, Oscar buzz. There was a Korean movie that came out a few years ago which set an unprecedented thing for the Academy Awards, where it was essentially a Korean movie, and it was called Parasite. It's a foreign movie. It's a Korean movie, and it won Best Picture a couple of years ago, and it's an extraordinary movie. And I think historically it was the first time that the Academy Awards is what it is, and I don't really have a lot of faith in it, or I don't really follow it like I used to. But typically, for many, many years, it was very, very much category driven. And foreign films had, their own separate category. And typically for, movies that would be nominated or that were eligible, or films that would win for the, the quote unquote, the big awards, were typically American movies. And so they always, for years and years, they would separate those two different things from foreign and American films. But when Parasite came out, which is an extraordinary movie, that won Best Picture, and it really, I feel, catapulted um, the idea of, and the acceptance to a degree of, foreign films being, well, they're just great films. There's not really, it shouldn't be, things shouldn't really be so defined all the time by category. If it's a really great film and it's done incredibly well, it deserves those accolades. It doesn't matter. And it was the first time, I believe, in the history of the Academy Awards, that a foreign film won Best Picture. And it was very cool. And then I saw that movie shortly after, and it's an incredible movie, and it totally deserved, what all the accolades that it got. And Parasite, it won for the Academy Awards in the year 2019, and it was directed by Bong Joon Ho, who is a Korean director who is just an amazing director. I haven't done any of his films. I haven't done any. He's got a huge list of genre defying films. I have a few of his films. He's actually kind of one of my favorite directors. And I haven't done any coverage of any of his films, but I definitely will. But he's done so many great films. I mean, the Snowpiercer, The Host, Memories of Murder, which is just like an amazing movie. It's probably my favorite film of his. Just so many great movies. And so it really, I think, opened the world to checking out, and, the acceptance of foreign films. Like, they're amazing, and it took it out of that category, and for the first time in history of the Academy Awards, it was regarded as just an extraordinary film, regardless of the the definition of, oh, this is a foreign film or this is an American film. So it really, I think, elevated uh, films in general, but elevated the idea of what a foreign film is, or what a foreign film can do as far as reaching an audience and the acceptance by that audience. And it set this really cool precedent. So this leads me to today's main topic. And this movie here, The Silence, this is one of my favorite films and one of my favorite foreign films. I just think this movie is kind of a masterpiece. And I never hear this movie mentioned. I bought this, and I talked about it in my previous show and some other shows, where I did a show on Welcome to Leith, which is probably my favorite documentary of all time, and I did a show on that yesterday. And I talked about, how when I first saw it, and then I eventually bought it, and I had gotten it at the first time I saw it was at this place that has un- unfortunately closed probably 5 or 6 years at this point now, which is hard to believe. But there's a really cool video shop in Camden, Maine, called Harbor Auto Video, and I used to have a long membership there. I went there for quite a few years. I had two memberships to two different video stores. And I still have my membership to Opera House Video here in Belfast. And during that time, I had a membership there and also Harbor Auto Video. And at that time, I was doing, I was working in Camden, and then also I was doing a lot of other projects and work. Uh, a lot of the work I was doing at the time was keeping me down in that area a lot. So I was down in that vicinity all the time, and I got in this habit of going to Harbor Auto Video, and I had heard from a couple of friends that that are really into movies that Harbor Auto Video has is a really great shop, and that they have a really great foreign film selection. And in general, they always had a good assortment of movies. And I remember going there, and I really was impressed one day. And this is going back quite a few years. And I went there after hearing a lot of good things about it. And it was funny because that place had at that point had been around for many, 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 many years, and I just never had a membership there. But after hearing all these good things, I finally went in, and then I was like, wow, like these guys, this place has a really great selection. And I remember their documentary selection was pretty incredible, was definitely the best that I had seen anywhere locally. And also their foreign films, so their foreign film selection was really, really killer. And they had, a really good, solid horror selection and drama, and they had a really good suspense, area, aisle or space. It's also they had a really good TV series too, area, because that was in the cusp of when the TV shows exploded. That's also where I discovered True Detective, which is my favorite TV show of all time, and I'm going to be doing a big show on that very soon because that show is just amazing. The first season, I discovered that through Harbor Auto Video too. But after I went to Harbor Auto Video and I realized that this place is really great, I'm gonna sign myself up here. I did, and then this was one of the first movies I rented there, The Silence, and I was completely floored by this movie. This movie is I feel like a very underrated masterpiece. Fast forward a few years after that, that's when the tide was changing as far as people stopped renting movies. The whole streaming thing took off, and we are at where we're at now. And they had announced that they were going to be going out of business. So those few weeks that they were closing, they were selling off all of their movies. So I went there over a period of like a couple of weeks every day, and I would scoop up whatever I could find, and I bought a whole ton of movies. I bought a bunch of documentaries. I bought a shit ton of movies, but this was one of the movies that I bought, and I was super excited. It's a DVD copy, but it's still really, really great. It's a great quality. It would be cool to get this on Blu-ray at some point, but this was one of the movies I was really excited that they still had, and they still had when they did close. And I remember those few weeks where they were selling off everything. It was a weird feeling because on one hand I was really excited to go in, and they were selling their movies really cheap. I at that point I wasn't buying Blu-ray movies. I wasn't collecting Blu-rays. I was still only buying DVDs. So, and I was still even buying VHS, which was crazy. But I was still all the movies I was buying were DVDs. And on one hand, I was like, really sad that this place was closing because it was awesome, and the folks that ran that place seemed really cool, and they had a great selection. I like to support businesses, locally run businesses that I feel are doing the public a service, and so it was sad on one hand, but then on the other hand, I was like really excited, and because I was amazed by certain movies that weren't being bought. All of them were commercial films, were being bought, but I was like finding all these great documentaries and all these foreign films that they still had on their aisle. So I was like scooping them up left and right. And this was one of those movies, and I was super excited to buy it. And but such an extraordinary movie, and a movie again I never hear about. I've recommended it to a few people over the years. I know. Yeah, a few years ago, I did a review on my Facebook page about this film, and it was probably it might have been I've had the Film Fanatic Facebook page for probably about 5 years. It's been a while. I've had it for a while, and especially up until about a year ago or a year and a half ago, I strictly use that page for basically writing little reviews for each for films that I loved. A lot of new movies and movies that I own. That's kind of where the whole Film Fanatic thing started. And then last year and then this year, I I started an Instagram page where I kind of continued that same kind of thing, and I also started doing some other things around it. And then with the Facebook page, that evolved to where I started for about a year or a year and a half. I started doing all these Facebook Live videos, and that's kind of what got me into moving into doing more video oriented kinds of projects, and doing the live video things, and then eventually getting an interest in doing interview segments through that page, and then that evolved to where now I have this YouTube channel, and that's kind of I still have both of those pages that I still use and that I still upload content to, but the main focus has evolved to where I'm doing this the YouTube channel. And I know like it was a while back, like the first couple of years that I had the Facebook page up, and that was the only thing I was using. I did a review of The Silence, and it's been a movie that I've always loved. I've watched countless times, and I've over the years I've like recommended it to people, and I've and people that I know that have seen it, and occasionally I've met a couple of people that have actually seen it, and it's always across the board. They're always usually just enamored by what an amazing film it is. It was directed by Baran Bo Odar, and it came out in 2013. And the cast is just spectacular. Ulrich Thomason, Wotan Wellach, Bugart Klosser, Katrin Sass, Sebastian Bloomberg, Oliver Stakowski. An extraordinary cast. Extraordinary. And I should say, no, this isn't, I think I might have said this was a French film. This is actually a German film. And what a powerhouse. Ulrich Thomason, who I've seen in quite a few movies since then, and Wotan Wilk, I've also seen in various films over the years. And again, this came out 2010. But this movie is just such an extraordinary movie. It's a very dark movie, and it really it has so much suspense to it. It's one of the most suspense. It's one of those movies that's it's so well crafted, and the suspense in this film is just nail biting. It just and it's such a great character study. The story is so interesting. It's very unusual, and it to me it's like one of the greatest like kind of murder mystery movies I've ever seen. It's just so good. It's got this whole like nail biting suspense from beginning to end, and it's such an interesting story. And it's basically centered on these two guys that are friends, and one of the guys is obviously kind of this deranged individual, and they get involved with this crime that involves where this girl gets murdered by them, and then they go about their lives and they basically kind of end their friendship, and they go about their lives, and they try to bury this dark secret that they of this like horrible crime that they committed. And 20 years or so go by, and then there's a series of these murders that happen, and where these girls are being kidnapped, and these kids have gotten killed, and it brings to the surface for both of these guys that are of their past, and they're brought back into the story, and you feel like, well, maybe these guys are responsible for these crimes again. And it's such an extraordinary movie, and the whole movie is centered on the investigation of where they follow these two characters, and eventually they become suspects. And then there's a series of all these events that happen that are just amazing and just so it's so well crafted, and it follows these essentially these cases that happen of these disappearances and these murders over the span of like 15 or 20 years, and it's such a great film. It's a very dark film. It's a very twisted film in a lot of ways, but it's so well crafted. The It's beautifully shot. It has such an incredible atmosphere to it, and it's definitely one of the best like suspense films I've ever seen. I mean, it literally is from the beginning to the end, and especially to where where you arrive to the climax of the story. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's a the cast is just incredible. The writing is just so top notch. And again, I'm always surprised that this film, I've never heard anyone talk about it. I never see anything about this film. And it's one of the best, one of the best films. It's a truly an extraordinary film. It's one of the greats. And during that time when I discovered this film, I was watching a lot of foreign films, and I think this movie is definitely one of the best German films I've ever seen. And for that matter, just it's on the it's on my you know it's definitely like in my top 10 or 20 films. I just think it's you know just such a piece of high art. And again, it was directed by Baran Bo Odar, the German film director. He's been involved with all kinds of different projects over the years. Um, he was he's been lately in his career. He's been doing these various TV shows for Netflix. He did a show that came out actually last year, 1899, The Dark, which was a series he also did, which was out in 2017 to 2020. Who Am I, which was 2014. Sleepless, 2017. The Silence, Quiet Stitch in 2005, and Under the Sun. I don't believe I've seen any other films uh, by Baran Bo Odar. But again, like I said in the beginning, I have seen quite a few films with a couple of these cast members, Ulrich Thomason and Wooten Wilk. Particularly, I've seen a lot of films since initially seeing The Silence with Ulrich Thomason, and he is such a great actor. I think he's one of my favorite character actors. Like he's German also, and I believe he got his start in doing lots of German films. But I've seen him in some American films, and he is such an incredible character actor. Like he's one of those guys that's truly an actor. Every time I've seen him in different films, I think I've even seen him in some comedy films, some other dramas. It's just uh, surprising, and I feel like he really fits in that definition of like a true actor. And every time I've seen him in other films since then, I've always been. I'm like, it always takes me a few minutes where I'm like, wait, where do I know this guy from? And then about 10 or 20 minutes into the film, I'm like, oh, that's the guy from The Silence. And to me, that's testimony to his ability as an actor, where he's really this chameleon. He really reinvents himself for each role. Because a lot of times that's a thing with actors. And to me, that's one thing that for certain actors that I really love, they they you can't recognize them. They immerse themselves in that particular role to an extent of where they take on this completely different personality. A lot of the times you have the opposite thing where certain actors kind of play, they're really good at maybe playing a character or a certain kind of character, and they're really good at that, or they have a certain way of how they deliver dialogue, and they have a couple of hits or whatever, and they connect with an audience. And then for years and years after that period, they end up essentially playing the same person, in each movie. And like some examples of that, I would say would be, well, like a big example of that would be an actor like Paul Rudd. Totally different kind of a breed of an actor. But I do really like Paul Rudd, and he does. He's mostly known. Well, now he's known as being Ant-Man, but he's done some mostly comedic roles. He's done some drama based films, but he mostly does like comedic roles. He's done some dramas and a few different things here and there. And I really like him. I think he's great. He's a really great actor. But the thing is about him is like I really feel every movie I see him in, whatever it is, he he's Paul Rudd. He doesn't like he plays himself essentially in every movie, and he doesn't really have like I think he's really good at one particular thing, and he's really great at at a certain way of or he has this great way of being very entertaining, and he has a certain way of how he delivers his dialogue and how he performs, and it's awesome. But I kind of feel as an actor, he's kind of like a one trick pony. He does one thing really, really well, like exceptionally well, and he's got a great presence. But he can't really. I haven't seen him in any films where he he messes with your expectations or really say surprises you. Um, like I couldn't see him in a real serious melodrama, for instance, or a murder mystery like this movie. I couldn't see him playing something serious or playing a villain or just playing an actor or playing a role where he's kind of in the background and he's very much where he is kind of low to the ground or just not doing his usual shtick as an actor. Like, so I think he's kind of like somebody I think is like more of a one trick pony. He does something very very well, and essentially he's made a career of not really being an actor but playing himself, being Paul Rudd. Another actor I think that happens a lot to, and I like him a lot. And there's certain films in his career that I really love. But another actor I think that does that, and he essentially plays himself in every movie, is Ryan Reynolds. I think he's done some good things. There's certain movies of his that I really love. But essentially, and he's done a couple of movies where he will play some interesting roles. And I think he's got a little bit more of, he's got a little bit more, you know, more, to a degree, I think he's got a little bit more versatility as an actor, say, than Paul Rudd. But for the most part, 90% of the time, he's hired for a movie to play Ryan Reynolds, to play himself. And I can appreciate that as a fan of films and certain actors and stuff. But I get much more invested in actors that you know where they're truly they truly fit in that definition of being called an actor, where they're a chameleon, and you don't they can play all kinds of variety, so many assortments of different kinds of roles, and they just can really surprise you and really take you on all these different journeys, and they immerse themselves, and they just they have so many of these different attributes, and I really gravitate towards actors like that much more so. Paul Dano, I think, is an actor uh, who is another great example of an actor who's truly an actor, where he can, play so many different kinds of roles. Movies like There Will Be Blood, or Smile, the movie about where he played Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, and then also where he plays the Riddler in the latest Batman. I mean, just those three roles in itself are so incredibly different that you don't even recognize him. And that's the kind of I guess the level or caliber of actor that I really kind of seek out and I really love, and that I think is, the true testimony of, or the true definition of what an actor is. And I feel like Ulrich Thomason is one of those actors. Like, I never recognize him in anything, and yet, he's obviously not a household name, say like, you know, Paul Dano even, or and especially like an actor like Paul Rudd. But it's great to see him get so much work over the years, and his body work is extraordinary, and I think he's one of the greatest working actors. And yeah, so this film, The Silence, came out in 2010. This it's one of the greatest German films I've ever seen. It's definitely one of the best foreign films I've ever seen. It is so chocked full of just nail biting suspense from beginning to end. If you're a fan of really great movies that are kind of shot or done in real time, but they're centered on, like a real deep kind of investigative um, analysis of a story, and it's really laced with all of these great characters. There's a lot of suspense. It has a really kind of dark tone to it, this movie is for you. It's so great. It reminds me of like really classic Hitchcock, but in a very modern context. Just an awesome movie. I can't recommend it enough. And again, like I have this DVD copy of it, and I'm pretty happy with it. I would love to get this on Blu-ray, particularly because this movie is visually it's stunning. It's beautifully shot. The music is really incredible. Great atmosphere. So it would definitely be probably a whole new experience to buy this on Blu-ray. But as of now, I haven't come across it, but probably at some point. But I'm pretty happy with this copy of this film. So yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. The Silence, 2010, directed by Baran Bo Odar. Killer movie. If you're in a mood for just a really great tale of, nail biting suspense, this is the movie for you. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for all your support, checking out all the wacky videos I do here on my Film Fanatic YouTube channel. If you like the stuff, please like and subscribe to it. And keep the comments coming. I love having dialogue with people. So thanks again, and have a great day. Peace.